I'd tell him, we want to dominate East Asia. We want to drive the Americans out beyond the first island chain. We want to drive the Americans out beyond the second island chain. And we want to make sure we dominate East Asia. We want to be the most powerful country in East Asia. We do not want to suffer another century of national humiliation. Now, how does this apply to the world today? Well, most of you were born in the unipolar moment. The unipolar moment basically ran from 1991 to 2017. And in the unipolar moment, this kind of logic didn't apply because there was only one great power on the planet. It was the United States. It was a regional hegemon. Some would argue it was a global hegemon, right? But it was incredibly powerful. China was weak during the unipolar moment, and there was no chance you were going to try to achieve regional hegemony. But what happened is China became economically powerful. China became an economic powerhouse. Good for China, not good for the United States. But China becomes an economic powerhouse, and it begins to translate that economic might into military might. And it begins to think about dominating Asia. And I want to make clear, if I were the national security advisor, I'd tell him, we want to dominate East Asia. We want to drive the Americans out beyond the first island chain. We want to drive the Americans out beyond the second island chain. And we want to make sure we dominate East Asia. We want to be the most powerful country in East Asia. We do not want to suffer another century of national humiliation. You all understand that this is what happens in international politics when you're weak. When you're weak, the more powerful great powers prey on you. Study NATO expansion if you have any doubt about that. Russia was weak in the 1990s, and it was weak in the first decade and a half of the 2000s. What did the United States do? We shoved NATO expansion down their throat in 1999. We shoved NATO expansion down their throat in 2004. And then after 2008, we tried to shove NATO expansion down their throat again regarding Ukraine and regarding Georgia. That's how the United States operates. It was powerful. Russia was weak. That's what happens when you're weak. And the Chinese surely understand that. So you want to be powerful. Again, you want to be a regional hegemon. And you can see China heading in that direction. Most Chinese will deny this, of course, which is the smart thing to do. But the Americans are very suspicious. So what is happening here in the world today? I'd say basically two things are happening. Number one, China is on its way to developing enough economic and military capability to think seriously about dominating Asia. And it should want to dominate Asia. It should want to imitate the United States. And oh, by the way, the Chinese are also developing power projection capability. They're developing a blue water navy, just like the United States. Do I blame the Chinese? Not one bit. But what do the Americans think about this? I told you, the Americans don't tolerate peer competitors. And you want to understand, this is basically a zero-sum game. The more powerful China gets, the weaker the United States gets. The more powerful the United States gets, the weaker China gets. So you're involved in this intense security competition. And as you all know, this security competition, underline that word security, is not simply a military competition, it's an economic competition as well. And that economic competition revolves around cutting-edge technologies. That's what explains what's going on in terms of U.S.-China economic relations. We, the United States, want to remain the number one country in the world in terms of developing cutting-edge technologies. China, of course, wants to replace us. Again, I don't blame the Chinese one bit, but the Americans are going to go to great lengths to prevent that from happening. All of this is to say we are involved today in an intense security competition that shows no signs of going away. And if anything, will get worse with the passage of time. This is a tragic situation. It has nothing to do with Chinese culture or American culture. I know many people in China blame the United States for all this trouble, and many people in the United States blame China for all this trouble. That's not what's driving this train. You all remember that between 1991 and 2017, the Chinese and the Americans got along very well. And then something changed. What do you think changed? Was it ideology? Was it domestic politics? No. What changed was the balance of power. You became really powerful. And when a country becomes really powerful in the international system, you can rest assured that Uncle Sam is going to put its gun sights on that country. And that's exactly what's happening here. It's hardly surprising. So my argument is it's the system that has caused this intense security competition. And let's hope moving forward, when we have a crisis, and we will have crises, that we can avoid a shooting war. Let's hope that this one plays itself out similar to the Cold War, where although the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in an intense security competition, that security competition never turned into a hot war. Let's hope that's the case this time around. But it is going to be intense, is going to be dangerous. I believe that the competition between the United States and the Soviet Union will define the 20th century. It will be the defining feature of the 21st century, not the 20th century, 21st century. Okay. Let me just say a few words about order, international order. And order for me is basically the bundle of institutions that dominate how states or dictate how states interact with each other. Institutions are basically rules, and an order is a group of institutions. During the Cold War, when I was young, there was an American-led Western order, and there was Soviet-led communist order. And in that American-led Western order, what were the bundle of institutions? It was the GATT at the time, which later became the WTO. GATT, IMF, World Bank, NATO, European Union. That was the Western order. Then, on the other side, the Soviets had their own order. Comintern, the Warsaw Pact, Comecon, so forth and so on. So there were these bundles of institutions that comprised these two, what I call bounded orders. Not really an international order. And they were of enormous importance. Then what happens is the Cold War ends, the Soviet Union goes away, and its order goes away. And what the United States does, unsurprisingly, is take its order, take its institutions, and try to spread them all over the planet. And indeed, incorporate China into those institutions, into that order. And China actually goes along with it because it provides a way of helping China to grow economically at an incredibly fast pace. Think about the WTO. Coming into the WTO in 2001 was manna from heaven for the Chinese, right? You liked that order. But you know what happened? What happened is you became very powerful. And when you became very powerful, you meaning China, became very powerful, you wanted to upend the order. And it makes perfect sense. Orders are rules. Orders are institutions which are rules. Orders are rules. And the question is, who writes the rules? You know who wrote the rules in the existing international order that you were integrated into in the 90s and early 2000s? Uncle Sam wrote the rules. But when you became powerful, you wanted to write your own rules for your own institutions. AIIB, Belt and Road, I could go on and on. Chinese institutions will become part of a Chinese order, and there will be an American order, very similar to the Cold War. So the old international order that you were born into is either gone away, or going away. And what is happening now is a Chinese-led order is beginning to form, and a Western-led order is beginning to form. And these two orders will play a key role in the security competition between the United States and China, just as the existing orders, just as the existing bundle of institutions on each side played a key role in the waging of the security competition between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Thank you.